Thank you all. What an honor it is to be here with all of you this evening. Thank you to Bridget and to Cassie. So amazing to spend the day with all of you. Thank you to the college. Thank you to Dr. Mark. And thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Usery, if you're watching out there. You've created an amazing program. I'm so impressed with what's here at Georgia College. I've had an incredible day on this campus, spending it with several of the forum students, but then also within the discipline with journalism and communications. And I've been so impressed not just with the thought leadership, but with the questions that you've asked. And Cassie's going to hit me with more of them a little bit later. I understand now why my mother, Jessie, has always been so proud to be a graduate of this incredible institution. So I'd like to begin with two things, if you'll allow me. First is a disclaimer. I'm not an expert on leadership. There are experts on leadership out there. They are often academics. They spend the balance of their careers rolling around in data and pulling research and publishing on the topic of leadership. That's not me. I simply had the great fortune to have had an incredible and really diverse career that allows me to have a different kind of lens on leadership and what leadership can be and what it looks like. And that's what I want to share with all of you today. I believe that being a leader and understanding what that is core to success, not only as an individual, but also for teams. Second, as Dr. Mark mentioned, both my parents and my sister are here with me this evening. What a blessing to have the very people who taught me about leadership to be here to support me. And with that, I really can't mess up this evening. Otherwise, Thanksgiving dinner is going to be very, very awkward. So I hope you will all support me in that. Today I want to talk about a few areas of leadership. These aren't necessarily formal philosophies. There are formal philosophies of leadership out there. Rather, they're ways to think about bringing leadership to life in the real world. What does that look like when you're in a job? How do you think like a leader? How do you develop something like that? How do you bring it to life? This is really built off, many of the observations and the things that I've experienced over the balance of my career. So over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to talk about three areas. First is a leadership mindset. What does it mean to be a leader? And really, why does it matter? Second is leadership in action. Who can be a leader? Who should be a leader? And how do you know a leader when you see one? Third is leadership to start. I would say the majority of the folks in this room, and potentially watching our students, first rule of marketing and communications is know your audience. I want to give you something to walk out of here with. What do you do over the balance of your academic career? But then when you go into the real world, how do you take this with you? So those are the three areas we're going to focus on today. So let's begin. Leadership mindset. There's an old saying that goes, you know what you call a leader without followers? Just a guy taking a walk. That's funny, but let's start with a level set of what a leader is. Being a leader is about who you are, how you think, and how you go about engaging with the world. It doesn't mean you have a team to manage. So leadership is not management. So first off, don't confuse the two. Management is the act of wrangling protocol and process and policies and paperwork and people. It's not necessarily leadership. It's absolutely important when it comes to big organizations and guiding and building teams, but it's not the same thing as leading. So to be very clear, first off, you can be an amazing leader and never have a management position. In fact, in his book, Tribes, I don't know if anybody's read it, highly recommend it. Author Seth Godin notes, quote, leaders have followers, managers have employees. Managers make widgets, leaders make change. So it's all about having a leader mindset. What does that look like in the real world? You have a job. How do you be a leader? And why does it matter? I think it matters because if you are a leader and you have a leader mindset, you're bringing innovative ideas to the forum, you're pulling people together, you're galvanizing other people to move forward together. Quick story. When I was moving out of television news and into the corporate communications world, it was kind of a tough transition, and I was having to sort of translate what my experience was into their terminology. I remember being asked, have you ever been a people leader? And I immediately replied, yes, of course I have. And the recruiter said, well, where is that on your resume? And I panicked because I had never formally had a management role. No one had ever reported to me on paper. And so I immediately rolled into all of these explanations of what I do as a producer of a show, and as a news anchor, and as a field correspondent, and all of the things that it takes to get people to one outcome at the end of the day, everybody rowing in the same direction. And I remember the recruiter kind of looking down and writing something, and I thought at that moment, oh, there is a difference between being a leader and being a manager. So if a leader is about effecting change and driving an outcome together, then it requires a particular mindset that others are following willingly. How do you get there? Well, you want people to follow you, right? That requires a couple of things. First, have a vision and share it. Bring them on the journey with you. Invite people to take part in what you're thinking and where you're going so that you can go together. I have a team of 400 people across my marketing and communications team. And over the past 2 years, we've experienced a ton of change. We've inherited some other teams from other groups across the company. We've undergone some pretty significant changes. And in our surveys that we put out, consistently over 2 years, I get questions. Why so much change? When are we going to stop changing? And I always think, don't they know this? They know what we're doing. And then I realized, they don't know what they're doing because I didn't tell them. They know what, they don't know why. So last week I had all 400 people in for an offsite at our headquarters in Pittsburgh. 2 days, we're sort of talking about what we're doing, and I decided our theme was going to be change. And I wanted to talk about it in a way that allowed them to see what I see. So I positioned the whole thing as a conversation like this. We think about change as something that's happening to us, something to be managed. They changed my schedule. I have to change my locks. But then this is what I said to them. From here on out, we're going to think about change, and we're going to flip the script. From now on, every outcome, every success, everything we put in place is change that we've enacted, because you know what? We are change agents. We are Marcom change, we call ourselves Marcom. We're Marcom change agents. I was bringing them on the journey with me. I had team members come up to me afterwards and say, I never thought about it that way. I'm coming to your team from technology, and change was always something I dealt with when it was handed to me. Now I feel empowered, and I'm excited about where we're going. Check that box, right? That's what I was looking for. All I had to do was tell them why and bring them on the journey with me. So have a vision and share it. Second, be the leader you always wanted. Be a force multiplier. What does that mean? Well, I've had some pretty amazing bosses in my career. I've had some not so amazing bosses in my career. I've taken notes on all of them. I once had a manager who was not quite so effective, and so I actually, in my very first true management role, would say, okay, what would so-and-so do? And I would sort of do the opposite. Conversely, I have had remarkable leaders. In fact, I'm still in contact with many of them today, and I will text them all and say, I have an issue. You have 5 minutes. What was the difference? They were all my bosses. The good set were leaders. They brought me on the journey with them. They empowered me. There is a philosophy called servant leadership. Anybody heard of it? Servant leadership is effectively based on 3 things: compassion, character, and competence. In my head, I basically boil that down to being a smart, empathetic leader who works with the team in mind. So you can have a great leadership mindset, but you have to bring the team along with you. How do you support them and get the best out of them to get to where you're all going together? A great example of this is in the book called Apathy Multipliers. The author discusses the concept of force multipliers. And he talks about former Massachusetts governor and Utah U.S. Senator Romney, who's widely known for leaning into what people needed. He started his career, for those of you who don't know, at Bain Capital. He always took the time to understand, his rep was, he took the time to understand the skill set of the people around him and what they brought to the table. So he was known for asking the right questions to determine whether people were in the right roles, but the best roles for them. And he would say, quote, what's getting in your way of success? And how can I help? What did that do? Well, word spread that A, he knew how to build a team, and he knew how to lean into talent. So there's a critical piece of the leader mindset that focuses on people as the linchpin around you. So you can have the mindset, but if you don't have the people engaged, that's the linchpin to your success, right? So last, let them know that you invested in them. People also knew that Mitt Romney was invested in his people and his teams. Same book refers to him as a talent magnet. Why? Because not only people within Bain, but people outside of Bain knew his reputation and wanted to come work for him because they knew he was focused on their success. Same offsite last week, I had an external guest speaker, amazing guy, named Mohamed Massaquoi. Anybody a football fan? Former UGA wide receiver, former Cleveland Browns wide receiver for several years. He just left the NFL about 8 years ago. Gone to work for Morgan Stanley, made a career change. He had a horrible ATV accident. Rolls over on him. He has to have his left hand amputated. He says it completely changed his life. So he completely changed his life. Today he's an organizational psychologist, and he goes into big companies and organizations and helps leaders think through change and how to get the best out of their teams. And I asked him in the offsite, what surprises you the most when you go into work with these big organizations? And he said, I go in and I talk with the leaders, and then I talk with the team members. And I'm always surprised that no one knows the leaders care. And I said, say more about that, what does that mean? And he said, people always know that the leaders care about the company and the bottom line and the outcome to what the change is that's happening. But the people don't know that the leaders actually care about them. That the leaders talk about their experience and how they're feeling and what their emotions are. If their career paths are what they want. And do we need to put things in place and make changes to marry with what their expectations are? He said that never gets said. They never say, I care. And he said, I think that hurts them as leaders. So needless to say, I ended my offsite with, you're a remarkable team. Thank you all for your incredible hard work. Remember that I care about you. Get home safely and text me when you get there. So, leadership mindset, have a vision and share it. Be a force multiplier, and tell them that you care. Second thing, let's discuss leadership in action. What does that look like? I think we can boil leadership in action down to ownership. So you can have a leadership mindset. You're all set, sort of like I was, right? You know what you have in your head, you know where you need to go, you know what you need everybody to do, you want everybody to go with you. But if you don't put that in action and own the outcome, it's all wasted. You've heard a rising tide lifts all boats. Sort of the same philosophy here. So ownership is not just of the outcome, but of what? The success of all the people around you. That means no matter your role, even if you're just starting out, you're constantly looking for opportunities to support the growth of shared purpose and the success of everybody else around you. There's a famous anecdote from the administration of John F. Kennedy that in the 60s, President Kennedy visited a NASA facility. You can nod if you've heard this. He visited a NASA facility, and during his tour, he came upon a janitor, and the man's sweeping the floors. And he introduces himself and he says, "Good to meet you, I'm President Kennedy. What's your job?" And the man replies, "I'm putting a man on the moon." That is an owner mindset and leadership in action. Now consider this. The most powerful thing out of all of this is if you have leadership in action and you have owner mindsets across your team, think about how powerful that can be. Everybody's working toward a goal together, and everybody has skin in the game. They all want a successful outcome. So how do you make that happen, especially if you're not the leader? What if you're just on the team? First, lead from where you are. The old saying, bloom where you're planted, very applicable here. Have a leader mindset, put your leader mindset in action, no matter your place on the org chart, no matter what your title is. I mentioned my team of 400. I have people who are not in manager roles. They're in what we call individual contributor roles. That basically means they don't manage people. But you know what? Off the top of my head, I can name 3 or 4 go-to people who are individual contributors. Why? I go to them because they have great ideas. And they know how to galvanize people. And they know how to get everyone rowing in the right direction together. They're my go-to because they have a leader mindset. Next, be open to new ideas and viewpoints. Diversity of thought creates innovation. Welcome and encourage people to disagree with you. Steve Jobs once famously said, "It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do." In fact, one of my learnings on that very topic came recently. About 6 months ago, I was presenting to our board of directors with my marketing leadership team. And I was asked a question by one of our directors about the application of data and analytics in a lower funnel application for marketing, if there's any marketers in the room. Now, I could have panicked. I'm not a marketer by trade, and that was, the detail they wanted was very complex. I would have felt I needed to answer. However, I simply said, "I'm going to let Jennifer answer that for you. She's the expert, and that's why she's our chief marketing officer." So, what have I done? I've not only shown that I'm a leader who can hire smart people, A. I'm confident enough to give her the floor in front of the board of directors, and I'm smart enough to get out of the way. That's why I hired her, right? Finally, leadership in action means helping everybody embrace uncertainty, even failure, to move forward. Some people will say, fail up. Some people say, my marketing team likes to say, test and learn. We like to test and learn a lot. It's all in service of continuing to innovate. That seems really logical. But from my seat, when you're pitching and defending multi-million-dollar campaign ideas, anything short of a perfect outcome can feel like failure. I joined PNC as a chief marketing officer about 4 years ago, and I rewired and restructured the team. Communications is obviously my strong suit. That was successful. And about 9 months later, the CEO asked me to take on marketing. And I said to him, well, you know I'm not a marketer by trade. And he said, I know. And I realized he didn't really want a marketer. He wanted a leader with a different type of thought leadership in the role. So within 6 months, I had reorganized the team. I hired a new rock star chief marketing officer, made changes to our agency of record for advertising, and put a new strategy in place. And for the first time in 14 years, this large publicly traded company had a new agency, a new team, and a new brand initiative. We're the 6th largest bank in the country by assets. There are 4,000 banks in this country. So to break through the noise, to create something that's different, that sets you apart, is no small thing. So with our agency partners, and Bridget mentioned this, we came up with the idea of being brilliantly boring. Co-opting the idea and the word boring into something that's responsible, trustworthy, reliable, something that a bank that's 160 years old would be doing for you. We were very excited about it, very different. But then we had to go and sell it into leadership. We had to go tell them, we want to call ourselves boring. We started with the CEO because if he says no, it's dead in the water. We put all the data in front of him and 3 options, kind of Goldilocks. The first was very vanilla, very safe, it looked like all the other banks. And then we put sort of a middle of the road, a little bit different, but not too terribly different. And then we put brilliantly boring in front of it. And he said, what should I know about these? What do you need? And what do you need from me? And I said, you can choose safe or you can be edgy. And he said, I like edgy, let's do boring. So it was, and it is, a pretty unprecedented campaign. I don't know if you've seen the ads. They're funny. If not, you guys go out and look them up. It's authentic. Investors love it. Customers love it. Employees have been brought along on the ride. It's already won several national awards, which we're super proud of. It's a brand initiative that we've galvanized everyone around. So that's a win. But more important than that is this. We had leadership who had our back. From the get-go, our CEO led our brand launch by getting on stage in an orange, brilliantly boring t-shirt. That's endorsing an idea. So I'm not gonna lie, it was super exciting and incredibly scary. Because we've gone, we've pitched, we've asked for investment, lots of money put into something like this. And it could fail. And what happens if it fails? So the night before my launch, my CMO calls me and says, how are you feeling? And I said, I feel great. Because no matter what happens, we're moving forward and we're moving forward together. If it doesn't work, we'll pivot and we'll do something else. Whatever we decide will be the right thing because we will make it right. And others need to hear that from you as a leader. In fact, I have a sticky note on my monitor at work that I've had there for so long that I've had to scotch tape it on there. And I regularly refer to it when I have team members who call me and say, oh no, the dashboard didn't show up this way, or the data didn't come back like we thought it was going to. The test and learn wasn't so great an outcome. And we talk through what we need to do, what changes we need to put in place. And I always end with this. Success is a lousy teacher. You're doing great, keep going. So leadership in action, lead from where you are. Be open and welcome counter ideas, and encourage a keep going mentality. Finally, we're going to end with this, leadership to start. Again, first rule of marketing and communications is what? Know your audience. A lot of students here. You're likely not to start out, I could be wrong, please prove me wrong. You're likely not to start out in a big leader role. So how do you think about getting to leadership? First, remember this path is up to you. You just need to be resilient. I tell young people all the time, there is no more ladder of success. Ladder doesn't exist, knock it over. Used to be there were rungs and there were titles you had to have. Doesn't exist anymore. I want you to, any rock climbers in here? I want you to think of a rock wall. That's what the ladder of success is today. How do you get to the top of a rock wall? You can't go straight up, it's kind of the point, right? You have to go sideways. Sometimes you have to go back. You have to go down to go back to the top, right? That's okay. In fact, I think it's good news because it means there isn't just one way to get there anymore. In my job, I'm responsible for the narrative of our company, right? Everything that we put out externally, everything that our leaders say, everything that my CEO often says. My team does a lot of writing and creating talking points that we give to him, and sometimes he follows them, and sometimes he gets in the room or in front of the reporter and has a better idea. One area of presentation I always lean into with him is when he speaks to young people. He grew up middle class, and he worked some pretty manual jobs on the way up. So he understands what it's like to work your way up. Recently, he was speaking with hundreds of young people. We have a large development program, so he was speaking with several hundred development associates at PNC. These are all recent college grads who spend at least a year rotating in different roles across the organization to see areas of interest, to assess fit. And he was asked at the end, how should I think about this job? And he said this, the chance that you're in the perfect job for you is 0%. The chance that we have the perfect job for you is 100%. Whether you find that perfect job is 100% up to you. If you have a leader mindset, you will find the right path. Second, be gracious and grateful. I have 2 grown children who've recently graduated from college. They're in the working world. And I've been saying this to them since they were little. You don't get anywhere by yourself. No one gets there alone. Be gracious and grateful along the way. At this point in your careers, you're going to be regarded, remembered, and reviewed for 3 things. How hard you work, how you show up, and how you treat other people. One of the most underrated and undervalued characteristics I find, regardless of age, experience, rank in an organization, is someone's approach to teamwork. Do other people want to work with you? Remember, nobody expects you to have tons of experience or to have all the answers by any stretch. But you can control the path that you set for yourself by having that leader mindset from the start, bringing people along, galvanizing others. So finally, and this might be the most important thing that you take away from today, be your own leader. Create your own leader persona that gets noticed. You might be the most educated person in the place. You might be the smartest person in the room. You might not be. While your degree and your internships and your resumes are all critical. Don't let me stop you, please keep going. It's not leadership. Leadership is what you're going to bring to the table that's beyond what's on your resume. Leaders always begin with hard work. So hard work and teamwork are going to be your currency. That's what you bring to the table every single day. So don't just go into work. Go into work early. Learn to make coffee, or at least learn where the Keurig cups are so you can restock the kitchen. Stay late and be the person who doesn't mind doing it. And be the person who raises their hand to do work that nobody else wants to do. It will make a difference. If you do that, you'll be known as the person who works hard and the person everybody else wants to work with. And that's where leadership begins. Thank you all for your time and attention. Let's have a conversation. Cassie's back. Cassie and I spent the day together. I'm sorry.
So let's thank Ms. Rosseter again for her comments, please. And I know Cassie has some prepared questions for our presenter, but you all should share your questions with us as well. There are two ways to do that. You can scan that QR code that you see up there, or you can just type in the URL into your browser, curious.leadcreatively.org. Curious.leadcreatively.org. You may get prompted to enter a code, and you'll see the code right there. I will be monitoring the chat and will relay questions to our presenter. But with that said, Cassie, why don't you get us started?
Why don't you take it?
Thank you, Dr. Long. There we go. There is a mic. All right, thinking independently and leading creatively right here. Well, thank you, Dr. Monk, and thank you, Ms. Rosseter, for starting us off with this conversation. I really appreciated your leadership philosophy, the leadership mindset, leadership in action, and leadership to start. My first question stems from your discussion about the leadership mindset. You started your career in journalism at NBC, and you eventually switched over to corporate communications with Coca-Cola. Obviously, there was a physical shift in that, but would you say that there was a leadership mindset shift there as well when you shifted in those positions? And if so, what was that leadership mindset shift?
Cassie asks good questions. I think there was more of an application, sort of go-to-market shift in the way that I had to bring leadership to life. So I talked a little bit about being a leader in the newsroom and that sort of thing, but never actually being able to put that in play with teams. So I would say it was more the way I had to bring it to life, because I was then actually in a role where I could truly affect change within a corporation. I would also say one of the reasons that I made the shift from, we talked about this a little bit earlier today, one of the reasons that I made the shift from television to corporate communications was that I felt I had skill sets that I was leaving on the table every day. I felt like there was more that I had to offer. And part of that is through a leader mindset. I was doing things every day that technically weren't in my job description. That was fine. I loved what I was doing. I loved it for 20 years. But then I actually wanted to put it in play in a role in corporate communication seemed like the right application.
Wonderful, thank you. And my next question actually also stems from your philosophy on the leadership mindset. I think it was point 2 that you made. You said, be the leader that you have always wanted. And so my question is, when you think back to your early career, what moments or mentors most influenced your leadership style?
I had a leader she actually was my first boss when I was at NBC News, and I used to watch her in the newsroom. She was younger than I am today, and she had 2 children who were very young, and they used to follow her around the newsroom like little ducks. And we always commented how put together Sharon was. And I always aspired to have her type of leadership because she was sort of the newsroom mom as well. She was the go-to, she was the leader in place who brought the leadership mindset to all of us. And we all wanted to follow her. Remember I talked about the guy who was taking a walk? She wasn't that. Everybody wanted to follow Sharon. And she's the person I think of when I think of who to be like. I want to be like Sharon.
We've got a lot of good questions coming in on the chat, and again, I'd encourage you all to continue submitting those. But on that note, would you tell us, we've got quite a few folks who are interested in your biggest inspiration.
We're only taking softball questions, by the way.
Yes.
My biggest inspiration. Oh my goodness.
I've got a tough follow-up to that.
Oh, good. My biggest inspiration, personally or professionally?
They didn't stipulate.
Okay, so I'm just going to answer the way I want to. I have to say my parents. I know that seems like an easy out because they're here. But what I would say is they taught me leadership in all of their roles, even now in their communities. They taught me what it's like to be a leader in action. My dad used to talk about all of at the time we called them their executive assistants, but secretaries within his organization. He knew every single person. And when we would go visit, he would walk us around and he would introduce my sister and I to everyone. He knew everyone. That's leadership in action. So thank you.
The follow-up to that, tell us about what leadership maybe looks like. You talked about it in a professional sense. What does it look like in, say, a family?
Wow.
That is anonymous, but I'm going to imagine that was a Georgia College student in this audience.
All right, let me dig in on that just a little bit more because I can't just let that go as it is. Every family is different, so there's not really one good answer to what leadership looks like within a family. Are we talking about how you bring your professional to your family?
I think that's probably embedded in this. And you also mentioned that you're a parent.
I am a parent.
Can you maybe tell us a bit about how you balance those?
Yes, we talked about that earlier today as well. I'm just going to repeat who was with me in the coffee session this afternoon. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about what we talked about, which is, there is I'm going to date myself, but you go back 30 or 40 years, and in particular for women, there was you can't have it all, right? And then it became, fast forward 10 years, it became, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at the same time. I'm going to call baloney on all of that, because I think there are plenty of women out there today, and men you should pay attention to, because, if you're going to have a family unit, everybody has some role to play, right? I think you can have it all. It's a matter of how well-planned you are, what kind of support system do you have. If you're a smart enough woman to have it all, then you can put some sort of structure in place to have it all. So that's sort of my answer around that. What I would say about children is hardest job ever, even with great kids.
You talked about how you feel like your leadership style stemmed a lot from your parents, and it's easy to see that leadership can start up here and kind of trickle down through a company or anyone in general. You talked about how something that you like to encourage your employees in is embracing failure. You know, it's a part of human life, and so if they see it stem from the top, it's a part of life. You know, it's just. So my question is, looking back, is there a moment when you failed as a leader, and how did you recover from that?
Great question. I'm going to go with fail up. Yes, there is a moment in my career that I think about often when I am engaging teams. I was at Coca-Cola. I had a very small team. I think I had 3 reports at the time, and we were undergoing a reorganization, and we knew it was coming. So we were all effectively on hold. Every project was on hold indefinitely until they made the decision and told us, A, what your role is going to be, and B, by the way, do you have a role? So it was very uncertain times. And I thought that I was doing the right thing by, keeping things light and having conversations with my small team kind of on a daily basis and keeping things, almost, if not happy, then at least positive. And in some of the feedback that I heard later, that didn't land as authentically as they wanted it to. And that was a big learning for me, because I thought I was being a certain type of leader who was bringing them along with, everything's going to be great. And that's not what they needed from me. And I didn't stop to assess that, right? I didn't I didn't do the Mitt Romney thing. What do you need from me? So that's my biggest learning. That's a fail up for myself.
We have a couple of questions on a related topic. You talked about going in early, being the one who goes ahead and makes the coffee, staying late, doing those things with a sense of maybe eagerness and so on. We've got a handful of questions about how do you do that to demonstrate that you care, but in a way that avoids burnout and also doesn't become everybody over-relying on you. Can you talk a little bit about the balance that you strike between those?
And I think the key word there is balance, right? You're going to put some boundaries around when you can't stay late. Somebody asks you to say something, gosh, I really wish that I could. I have this today. Because the other thing that's going to do is set you up as somebody who knows yourself well enough and is not afraid to sort of speak truth to power, right? So you don't just want to be a yes person. Nobody wants a yes person. Everybody wants somebody who's smart enough to know when to lean in and when to engage and then when to step back and explain why. And don't be afraid to do that.
And what about, there's another question on that topic. What do you do when you feel like you're working very hard and maybe it's just not being noticed? It's easy to imagine how we could appreciate that stuff is getting done, but not know that you're the person behind getting it done.
Correct. I had a young man who recently had this very situation. And he was working very hard, and he was putting reports together. And while he was writing them, they had to filter through someone else before they got shared upstairs. And so the sharer got the credit, right? And so the question was, what do I do about that? And I said, you know what, there's a very tactical way to work that into, gosh, I'm so glad that so-and-so shares that with you. I work really hard on that every single week. So there's a way to represent yourself and make sure that you're engaging in conversation. You don't have to do it in a way that discounts what anyone else is doing. You're simply calling what you're doing, your skills. I really enjoy doing X, X, and X. Making sure that people are aware of what you're bringing to the table. It's a good question.
You spoke about working on teams a lot, collaborating a lot, which is something that I think whatever field anyone in this room goes into, we're all going to face at some point in our life. I'm looking out to the audience right now and I see a lot of nurses in their scrubs. You have managed many crises at global companies, so nurses are frequently in very high pressure situations. How do you keep teams focused and motivated when things go wrong? And to follow up, how do you lead a team when the spotlight is on during a crisis or high pressure situation?
All right, so 2 questions in there. How do you keep everyone motivated? And what was the second one?
And how do you lead a team when the spotlight is on during a crisis or high pressure situation?
So how do you continue to motivate the team during pressure? You know, it's not unlike every control room in a news program when you're in breaking news. That's my, quick grab reference. It's calm within the chaos, right? And if you're leading, you're galvanizing everyone and making sure that everybody understands their role. That way you have no confusion. So that's the first thing as a leader. Second thing as a leader is to make sure everyone that knows that you're there. Again, not only that you care, but you're there for them. You become the center of the storm, right? You have to be the calm in the middle. I've been both in control rooms during big breaking news events. I've been, at the fore of crises that come into an organization when the headlines hit the media and your phone starts to ring and in come the texts and people want to know what you're doing about this. Because when you're not well, it's your problem. So I would say that's when you have your team around you. And if you've done your job to that point, everyone knows what their role is. You're immediately giving instructions. You're asking the right questions. Is so-and-so in place? Are we set up for this? And then you move forward from there. And what's the second one?
How do you lead a team when the spotlight is on during a high-pressure situation?
Kind of the same answer, right? It's up to you as a leader. Poker face, be as calm as you possibly can, and you need to have the answers. They might not be the right answers. It might be a fail-up moment. But in that moment, you're guiding, and you're the sort of the cornerstone of calm for everybody who's there. Shout out to nursing students. Thank you.
We've gotten a couple of questions here on a similar note, dealing in some way with perfectionism. So thinking especially about your career as a journalist, there's probably always something that went into print, went to press, went on air that you wish you could change one word, you wish you could get one more quote. Similarly, in corporate communications and in marketing, a lot of how you make your decisions is based on perhaps what you could have said that you didn't say, and so on. Can you tell us a little bit about how you navigate perfectionism in your work and as a leader of an organization?
There is no perfection. So just start from there. If you start with the assumption that it's never going to be exactly what you want, no matter how hard you work, especially if it's a crisis situation, the best you can do is lead your team and get to an outcome that's acceptable for all of the audiences that you serve. Case in point, here's an example for you. Last Monday, a week ago, we announced a $4.1 billion acquisition of a smaller bank. The comms side of my role requires that we do all of the prep. We're writing a lot of the communications, and we're putting in place the communications via media. So there's decisions that go into that. Are we going to do an embargoed exclusive with the Wall Street Journal? Are we going to put our CEO on with CNBC? Yes, yes, yes. There's always the risk with anything that you do with the media that, unless you place it, unless you buy it, and that's marketing, it's not going to be exactly what you want. It's just not. So if you start with that level set, and you get everybody else on board around you, then your outcome is going to be good enough for everybody else. And headlines make a difference.
I know Cassie has some more questions, but we've heard a lot in the questions as well about what's a piece of advice that you would give, say, to a student in this room who's maybe a little more quiet or who maybe struggles a bit with their confidence?
Go to improv. No kidding. I have worked with, there's lots of public speaking groups. Those are good. But if you really want to learn how to respond in the moment and how to be unafraid in responding, go do improv. I had probably 4 or 5 colleagues at Coca-Cola who were really good at what they did, but would get just total jitters in having to get up in front of even small teams. That's my recommendation. Atlanta has a great program.
You hear that? You heard it here, folks.
I want to touch on your last point that you made, leadership to start. What lessons or leadership lessons can students practice right now, today? What can young professionals do to stand out today?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, the fact that you're here, check that box. Because I think a lot of forming your own leadership mindset is core to being a student. You're here to learn, right? So you need to learn how to be a leader in this moment. This is your opportunity, right? So many of you are engaged with things on campus, you're engaged with groups. What I would say is share your ideas with others. You don't have to be in a formal role to do a little test and learn, right? You just want to be sharing your ideas with other people and kicking things back and forth with one another to see how that lands, right? Your friends are the best people to test and learn with. She's done.
So a question that we often like to ask is if you could go back and talk to your 18 or 20-year-old self, what would you want your 18 or 20-year-old self to know?
Well, first of all, I would say bangs are never a good idea. Seriously, I would say get rid of the imposter syndrome today. You're going to be in some tough situations. You're going to doubt yourself. You're often going to feel like you're not an equal. Get rid of that. Brush it out today. You belong in every room you enter.
Another quick question that we often ask, what's a book that you think everybody in this room needs to read?
Little Women.
And why do you say that?
Shout out for that. Well, a couple of things. On a personal note, it was the first big girl book that I ever read. And my mother will tell a story. Are you crying? My mother will tell a story about my coming home from 3rd grade, this big, thick book. And I would carry it in my little, or I had a little bag. And it took me so long to read it that the librarian called her and said, "Are you sure you want her to keep checking this out?" And she was convinced I was going to be sideways because I carried the thing around for so long. But fast forward to today, who likes the Greta Gerwig version of the movie? Who's seen it? If you haven't, watch it. What I would say is it does a nice job of pivoting what is originally a story about 4 sisters during the Civil War and their position in life to a story about empowerment, right? And how do you bring your skill set and your understanding of the world to the fore?
Last question, Cassie.
I was going to take that question at the end. Reframe it and end us on a fun note. Obviously, there's 2 versions of the film of Little Women.
Correct.
Which one do you prefer and why?
I like the most recent one. It doesn't totally follow the book. They describe some of the some of the famous quotes to other characters in the movie. I can get around that. But I like it because I think it tells the right story in a modern frame so that people today understand not only maybe what were the challenges for women during the Civil War, but what that looks like today. And I think there's a lot of corollary between what was then and what is today. Last words. You're all leaders. The fact that you're here, the fact that you took time out of your afternoon when you probably have 72 other things to be doing, is not only impressive, but it's important. Because if for nothing else, you have a new view on things, I hope. And I hope you'll take what you heard today and you learned today, and even if you don't put it in practice, talk about it with somebody else and try to bring it to life that way.
Wonderfully said. Please join me in thanking our presenter. We have just a couple of last things to share with you. Keith, are you able to advance my slide for me? Oops. There we go. I want to say that we invite you, you can scan this QR code to read or to take part in our must-reads series. We have 12 books that we think everybody should read in the year 2025. You can scan that QR code or you can type in mustreads.leadcreatively.org. We have a virtual book club connected to those books, including a wonderful book called Bill of Obligations that we're discussing this Thursday. And I even have a few copies of the book left in our office if you'd like to pick up a copy. We're also, in our virtual book club series, reading a beautiful novel called Family. The virtual book club for that is in November, and a wonderful book called Fierce Conversations. The virtual book club for that is in December. Keith, I'm sorry. There we go. I want to remind you all that this is Constitution Week. And September 17th is Constitution Day. We have a wonderful range of events and opportunities associated with Constitution Week. You can go to gcsu.edu/Constitution Week to learn about them. Of particular note, I want to point out that we have our annual Constitution Week concert tomorrow called Presidential Tunes. And that is in this room tomorrow at 6. It's going to be a really great event. On Wednesday, we're having a panel discussion on checks and balances in America in the Peabody Auditorium, as well as a lunchtime conversation at noon facilitated by President Cox called What is the Rule of Law and Can I Find It in America? As part of our Times Talk series from noon to 1 in the Peterson Room of Russell Library. And then next Tuesday, we have our annual Supreme Court review. So reviewing the last year of the docket of the U.S. Supreme Court. So we invite you to take part in any of those. Keith, sorry, one more time. There we go. I also, since it's the beginning of the year, want to point out to you all that we are starting our program in France again this summer, our intercultural leadership program based in Strasbourg. Virtual information sessions available, and you see that up on the screen, as well as TEDx Georgia College, which is 1 month and 2 days from today in Russell Auditorium. We encourage you to get your tickets at TEDxGeorgiaCollege.com, and thanks to the sponsorship of GC Journeys, student tickets are available at a tremendous discount. So all of that is available online at TEDxGeorgiaCollege.com. Thank you all for being here. Again, another special thank you to Amanda Rosseter, as well as to Cassie Robinson.